Which war did you serve?
No war.
What was your branch of service?
U.S. Navy.
What was your highest rank?
Hospital corpsman, second class.
And what general locations did you serve?
Oh, I started out at Great Lakes as a recruit, and then I was there for Corps School, and then I was stationed in Annapolis, Maryland at the hospital there. And then I went to Bethesda, Maryland for ear, nose, and throat school. And from there, the last year, I went to St. Albans Naval Hospital in New York, where I met my wife, the nurse.
Were you drafted, or did you enlist?
No, I enlisted after 1 year of college, running out of money and fear of the draft. I didn't want to go in the Army.
Where were you living at the time?
Detroit, Michigan, where I grew up.
Do you know what day that was? That you enlisted?
Sure. It was 18th of November, 1957. Monday morning.
And why did you join?
I ran out of money in school, and I'd heard about the chance to go to school while being in the Navy. And I had a friend who was going to go with me. He was supposed to meet me there, and I should have known better since he was a good friend. He never showed up. And my being efficient, I signed up right away, and he never showed up. He was still my friend.
You talked to him afterwards?
Oh, many, many years until he died last year.
Why did you pick the service branch that you joined?
The Navy? Well, the alternatives, Air Force was never an alternative. The Army, I didn't want to run around in mud and sleep outdoors. It just made sense, plus they had a chance for the program. And I had been in ROTC 3 years in high school, and that was Army ROTC, so I knew things about the military pretty well. I was interested in the Naval ROTC program in college, since that paid your way, but you had to have 20/20 vision. So I was eliminated the first line, let alone the first round.
So, what were your first days in service like?
Oh, well, let's see. The first problem was when I went to take the test. They make you take the GCT and the ARI. It's a verbal and arithmetic test. So I'm in Detroit, downtown, with a bunch of other guys, and I take the test, and the guy comes out and says, "Take it again." So I had to take the whole thing with different forms. They call those equivalent forms now, I know. And I took it again, and he came back out and said, "Okay, what are you trying to do?" And my answer was, "I'm trying to go in the Navy." Remember, I'm 18 years old at the time. And what's going on? And he says, "Well, you just scored among the top scores we've ever had in Detroit in the arithmetic and the verbal. You have the absolute lowest score we've ever recorded in Detroit in the mechanical." And I said, "That's me." So we went through the mechanical test together. I had no idea how gears turned or what. My father was a baker. We had a screwdriver. We had a hammer, and we had an old saw that was rusty, and I didn't know which one to use on what. So I went in that way. And then we get in a train. It was the first time I ever left Detroit environs except playing baseball in Escanaba on a bus. And the train didn't get into a real late at night into Great Lakes. I think we got in about 2 o'clock in the morning. They gave us a blanket. And at 5:30, a guy came in and took a Coke bottle and ran it around a garbage can to wake us up. That's how I learned about the Navy. That's a real direct answer to your question, by the way.
Yes, it is. So how did it feel, just that first little section? How did you feel?
That morning?
Yeah,
I thought, what an idiot I am. What an idiot. So then I went to boot camp. But it worked out nicely in boot camp because they lined us all up, and there's probably 60 of us, something like that. And his name was Mr. Hall. I have his picture. He was the first class, bosun's mate, actually. And I hear, "Trahiotis!" And there's 60 of us. And I come out, and he says, "You're going to be the RPOC, the recruit petty officer chief. You're going to be in charge the whole time I'm gone. And all night and everything like that." Why? Because I had the highest score.
I'm sorry, where was the boot camp again?
There was Great Lakes.
The Great Lakes.
Yeah, the two big ones were Great Lakes was one, San Diego was the other one.
So anything else about boot camp? Anything?
No, I lived through it. I think the only thing that was probably remarkable was at the end of it, Mr. Hall invited me to his house to have dinner with his family, and my parents were sending me scotch in a little plastic bottle, and I would have two of them. They would come in candy, underneath candy and cookies, and I would send them back. So I always had a fresh supply of scotch that I would carry on myself, and so I took him some scotch, and I asked him, did he always bring people? He said, no, I don't know why I invited you, I just wanted to. I wanted you to meet the family. He just liked me, so that was a happy thing.
Did you bring the scotch?
Darn right.
Do you remember any of other of your instructors while you were there?
Well, I sort of do, but not too much because there were a bunch. But being in the position I was, I had to be in the first row to the right. Well, I had ROTC, so when they were giving instruction, like on M1 rifle, I go to sleep because this is early. You're waking up really early in the morning. And the guy would kick me and say, "Trahiotis, you're sleeping." And I'd say, "No, I'm not." And then he'd say, "Well, what are the parts of an M1 rifle?" And I would say, "Stock group, barrel receiver group," and he would. And trigger housing group. And he'd say, "Oh, you weren't sleeping." Well, yeah, I was sleeping, but I learned that in high school ROTC. Okay, so you remember little things like that, but nothing else.
How'd you get through it?
It wasn't easy because I hate authority. I hate discipline. Although I'm very disciplined in life, I don't like external pressure on me. And I managed to, you just do it. Everybody does it. You just go through and you come out the other end. It wasn't horribly difficult. I mean, it wasn't a strain physically, because most of us in those days were in pretty good shape. I mean, nobody was really severely overweight, or the culture was an outdoor culture for kids, so it wasn't super difficult or anything like that.
After boot camp, where'd you go?
Well, then they ask you what you'd like to do. And the first thing you have to know, you must have learned this, the needs of the Navy come first. Those are the most important words they could ever tell you that you should remember. No matter what, you sign up for anything, then it doesn't matter what they promise you, because the needs of the Navy come first. So no matter what they ask you, no matter what they say they're going to do, the needs of the Navy come first. And so people were filling out, I'd like to be a signalman, I'd like to do and I put in hospital corpsman because I thought that would be a good thing. And I got that. Not everybody got what they wanted because the needs of they were stuck on submarines. They didn't want to be in a submarine. I mean, if I were in a submarine, I don't think I would have made it because I'm claustrophobic. I mean, I don't like elevators, let alone if you took the elevator and put it, 200 feet below the water line. But it worked out. So I went to course school in Great Lakes, just across the bridge, and that was like 3 or 4 months there. And then met 2 really good friends. Well, I met a lot of people. 2 of them ended up being friends. One of them passed away last year. Tom Jones became a federal judge, and we were always in touch. He's a real outlier. He ended up getting colon cancer. He missed one and only one checkup, stage 4, but he managed to live 13 years, he's a way outlier, and he finally passed away. Davey Brower, I still talked to him. The last time was like a week ago. He's in Wisconsin, retired.
So when you first got to where you're going after boot camp, what were your first impressions of it?
Oh, well, that school was much more interesting because it had substance to it. It was new. I mean, it could have been a boot camp would be interesting, but I'm not sure to whom. But course school is much more interesting. You learned about drugs. You learned about, and you learned general nursing skills. You ended up being sort of a primitive nurse after 3 or 4 months. But you learned about drugs, you learned about vagaries in medicine and simple stuff. But it could be interesting, and I had a heck of a time there because I have a fairly photographic memory. So again, I could sleep during the semi-sleep and then answer the questions, which blew their minds quite a bit, but it worked out.
Do you remember anyone of your instructors or anything at that nursing school?
Well, more than remember, there was Sophie Gornish, who we had still been in contact with. Peggy will talk about her. She was the nurse there, and she ended up independently recruiting Peggy with four of her nursing friends from Pittsburgh. And we've been in contact with her a few times, say hello and take her to lunch and stuff like that. Other than that, just, let's see, none of the instructors there, actually.
And you were able to get through it just because of your photographic memory, or?
No, you had to study too. I mean, it was new stuff, and I was able to get through it. We all studied and took tests and all that. But it was, how would I put it? It wasn't college level stuff, but it was above high school level. But it wasn't unduly challenging, but you had to work at it. I mean, you're going to learn the side effects of 20 drugs. If you don't know what they are, you got to learn them.
So after getting out of that school, where were you sent next?
Then Annapolis, Maryland, to a little hospital there. And I was there for a year, and that was a challenge. It was a very, very small hospital. And Tom Jones, the judge, he went with me there. He was a guy in course school. So, and the other guy, Dave, ended up in a dispensary in Washington, so we still saw each other quite a bit. So Jonesy and I, we both were cornered in the hospital. And we had many adventures. Took care of some wonderful, wonderful people, because the sick officers' quarters, especially in Annapolis, takes care of retired officers, warrant officers and above, for like World War I, World War II. And we took care of some very, very famous admirals, generals from the Air Force were there. I took care of a man named Boyd McCandless, who was a Medal of Honor winner, which nobody knew at the time.
If you repeat that name.
McCandless. His name was Admiral McCandless. Well, the easy way to find his name is go look in the internet for the first man that ever flew, if you want to call it that, outside a spaceship, untethered, was his son, Bruce McCandless. The second or third. I think he was probably the third. But who I called, by the way, one time. And I actually got through to him. I had a nice 45-minute-hour conversation because I took care of his dad. And he never came around. He was a midshipman at the time, which I didn't know. His dad had another marriage, so he had little kids. But his dad was always typing with his thumbs. Typing. He was a wonderful man, but he had real physical problems. So I took care of him for the better part of a year. And what that means is you'd be taking care of him, among other patients, 7 o'clock in the morning till 9 o'clock at night, 3 days a week, 7 till 5. And then 1 to 4 in the morning. It was charming. The hours that you worked were really, you didn't have a union,
So 3-hour shifts.
No, 7 to 9.
7 to 9. Oh.
7 a.m. to 9 p.m. And then come back 1 to 4. Well, it was charming. But I took care of him, and among others. And that they were wonderful. They were really, really good people. Their wives sometimes were, Mrs. Admiral, Mrs. Captain. It was a syndrome that was not always pleasant, because they thought they had the rank instead of the man. But other than that, and Captain Conley was a wonderful guy. He was the head of the hospital. He was a surgeon. I used to help him quite a bit. And then I ended up dating his daughter, Trish, which he didn't find out about for a while. She was in high school. She was a senior in high school. But it was okay. He winked. It was fine.
Once you found out.
Yeah, it was fine.
After being in Annapolis, where'd you go after that?
Then I ended up at Bethesda in eye, ear, nose, and throat school. They just started a new training school. Two of us, a gal, Annie and I, and I ended up going there, which changed my life totally. It determined my life. I didn't know it at the time, but it was a wonderful place. There were these great doctors. There was Captain Taylor was the head of the place, and they're all ENT people. One of them is still alive, Glenn Webb. He's in head and neck surgeon in Virginia. Hanson, who was the most important man in my life, incredible guy. He died of cancer a long, long time ago. He had cancer twice. Beat it the first time. While in medical school, he had cancer, beat it, and then he got a different cancer later and couldn't beat it. But fantastic human being. And then I learned an awful lot about everything there. But that was what they did there. They taught you about being a physician's assistant, essentially, and first assistant in surgery. It was kind of fantastic experience. In fact, I can show you. I can show you on the web. There was an article that was done on ear surgery that was very modern at the time, and our place was doing it. And there were 2 or 3 places in the country where it was being done. And when Life magazine wanted to do a spread on it, it was decided to do it at the hospital. So I can show you later where you can find it on Life magazine. All our pictures are in there, and it's a 4 or 5 page spread. And I was with, people might remember Shana Alexander. She was on 60 Minutes when she was a woman fighting with the other guy. She was the young reporter then. And I didn't know who she was. She was just a nice looking lady. And Fritz Goro was the famous photographer, came out with boxes of cameras and stuff. And I was finished for the weekend. I was assigned to take care of everything. And including take out a temporal bone from a cadaver, set up the surgery so they could see it in the temporal bone. I can show you the pictures.
Did you go anywhere after being in Bethesda?
Pardon me?
Did you go anywhere else?
Yeah. After Bethesda, well, that was interesting too. When I was in Bethesda and everything was lovely, and Captain Taylor came by one day and said, "Tino, what's the matter? You look bored." I said, "I am bored." And he said, "What do you want to do?" "Well, I got a year left. I'd like to go to New York." And he says, "Why do you want to go to New York?" I said, "Because when I get out of here, I'm going to be going to school many, many years. So I'd like to have a year as a young guy in New York just so I could have fun, go to plays." And he said, "Oh, okay." And I think that was a Thursday. I think Monday I got a certified letter from Bureau of Medicine and Surgery to me. I mean, I'm an enlisted guy. At that time I was a 3rd class, which is like a corporal. And I should have kept it. It said, the hospital in 3rd class, me. "If it is not an imposition," that's how it started. "If it is not an imposition, you may take this ticket that we've given you to your new station, training station, or your new station in St. Albans Naval Hospital in New York. And then you will leave on this date. If it is an imposition, call this number." So I take the letter, I just go around the corner down there to the doctor's offices, and I open it up. I say, "Hey, Captain, look what I got." And he smiled and said, "I wonder how that happened." Well, we had a direct line to BUMED because at Bethesda, we took care of presidents, we took care of senators, all the congressmen. They either went to Walter Reed or they came to Bethesda. I used to take care of Rick Over, Estes Kefauver. I mean, there was just a run of people that I would take care of. And I was not the only one, but everybody took care of. So I used to do the annual hearing test for Rick Over. The person that run silent, run deep, he was there and took care of him. And he had a little tie clip that was of his submarine, and he gave it to this little kid. And the kid didn't know who he was, so I said, you better keep that. Told him who he was. It was a great place. We took care of people. One time, I had my Liberty. Liberty's a day thing. You can, at night you don't work, you can leave. And they told me, you're not on Liberty tonight. And I said, why am I not on Liberty? They said, well, you're going to meet with the Australian ambassador and have dinner with him. Why am I going to do that? They said, well, you read. And he wanted to talk to somebody who reads. So I said, okay. So instead of picking some doctor, they picked me. And I went up there to the top floor where the presidents go. And there he was. And he opened the door. And I spent the evening and actually he had me call my parents. He says, go ahead, use the phone. It's free. So I called, and my father thought something was wrong because I always call collect because I never had any money. And now I'm calling. He said, what's the matter? And I said, I'm having dinner with the Australian ambassador. And he said to me in Greek, come on, what's going on? So he gets on the phone and he says, no, he really is. I'm the Australian ambassador. There was stuff like that would happen. They were just lovely people. And then I went to New York, and that's where I saw Peggy for the first time. She was a nurse. She walked by, and I followed her. And that didn't go too well because she told me she didn't want to go out, come back when I had 6 weeks to go because she was an officer and I was enlisted. So I dated her friends instead, who were officers who didn't have the same scruples. And then with 6 weeks to go, we started dating, and that was it. We've been married 53 years. She was in 14 months after I got out, which was a horrible 14 months. I was in school. We had no money. I was hitchhiking because I sold my car to save money to get married. So every 6 weeks I would hitchhike between Detroit and near Pittsburgh to see her. It was a horrible time. Now, being in New York was great. One of the docs there is still alive. I think he was up till last year. And we went out to see him. And they always treated me like a son. I mean, one of the wonderful things about all this was the people in the service were like really highly educated versions of the people that I met when I worked. I started working when I was 14. And all the older people really took care of young people. It wasn't an issue of mentorship. Nobody used that word, they just did it. It wasn't like an overt thing. Old people took care of young people. They taught them stuff, they laughed with them. They had standards for them. So these people were like that. And they taught me truly they objectively taught me how important it was for older people to really take care of younger people. And that's emotionally and intellectually both. And make life interesting to them. Respect them. And actually, while I was there, when I was in Bethesda, the last year I was there before I went to New York, I got bored. It's not easy to get bored. We were doing head and neck surgery, tonsil surgery, ear surgery, whatever. But once I saw it, if I saw it the second time, then there was no challenge for me. I mean, there was a challenge for the people doing it every day, and they have to do it. But then I was beginning to realize this is not for me. I'm more of an academician. My brain is much more flighty, and once I know something, I want to go to something I don't know. And I couldn't articulate that. But what I did do is I ended up, and I guess we were carrying on a theme a little bit. There were these two docs that were interns. One was named Korn. He was with a K. He was from Iowa. The other guy's name I keep forgetting. It was an Irish name. He was from Tufts. So I would shadow them from midnight till 7 in the morning, or 11. And I did that for a year. I slept 3 hours a night. And then I did that, plus I worked at Washington General Hospital from 10 o'clock at night till 7 in the morning. And whenever came in, this nurse and I, we were the nurses. So we'd scrub in, it didn't matter. I mean, somebody go in and blow up a restaurant. One guy one time went in with a shotgun, and I don't know how many people we shot. We had every room was full of people, and we would have to go room to room. It didn't matter. But then again, the most important thing I learned there was how wonderful it was when really great surgeons were great people. They weren't authoritarian. In those days, they were generally authoritarian, but they didn't look down on people. The really good ones taught the young people. And that was very important to me in my life as an academic.
And this was in New York.
No, that was in Bethesda
That was
before.
in Bethesda.
Yeah, I'm just going back a bit because I'm trying things. And in New York, that kept pace. But in New York, I did have fun. I went out. One time I got thrown out of an operating room, and they took me to a Manhattan iron over throat. This guy named Bellucci, who was one of the 3 top surgeons, was doing this tough ear stuff. And they told me, before I went, keep my mouth shut, which is very difficult for me. And they just said, just keep your mouth shut, we're going to take you. So I went, and I think by 8:30 in the morning, I was thrown out of the operating room for asking him why he did this the way he did it. And so I was gone for the whole day. They just looked at me like, we told you, keep your mouth shut. But that ended up being lucky too, because I went down to the doctor's lounge, and everybody's wearing scrubs, green scrubs in those days. And I'm sitting there, I don't know anybody, and it turns out to be near lunch. And this really, really fine-looking man, coiffured hair, and he had his fingernails were all perfect and everything, and he's wearing this suit that was incredible. Sits next to me and he says, "Have you had lunch?" And I said, "Nope." He says, "Here, share mine." So I have a sandwich, and he says, "What are you doing here?" And I said, "Well, locally, what I'm doing here, I got thrown out of the operating room. Bellucci threw me out." Then the guy starts to laugh. And he says, "Well, are you interested only in ear surgery and stuff like that?" I said, "No, I'm interested in everything." He says, "What do you know about head and neck surgery?" I said, "Well, I know a lot about it." "Well, how do you know that?" I said, "It's a fantastic book. A man named John Marquis Converse wrote this book, and I have it by my bedside. And I read it all the time. It's just fantastic." So he started asking me questions, and I answered the questions. And we finished lunch, and he shook my hand and wished me good luck. And when he left, people said, "You know who that guy was?" I said, "Nope, John Marquis Converse. Can't make that up." And he died probably 3 years ago, or something like that. It's hard when you're getting older. You're squished. But he had a nice write-up in Time magazine, and he was the head and neck guy. But here's another guy that was just sweet and nice and good modeling.
And what was the name of the place in New York? You had Manhattan ear, nose, and throat. You were
No, that's where I was visiting. I was at the St. Albans Naval Hospital.
okay.
And that's in Queens. It's still there. Peggy and I went back, but it's a VA hospital now. It's like going back to, when you go back to school. The school is always smaller than you remember it being. Well, that's the way this was.
What was a typical day for you all?
Typical day?
Yeah. If you can think of one.
Oh, goodness. Well, it was busy. I mean, no matter where I was, the day would start at 6:30 in the morning. And usually I was in a clinic in surgery, had an emergency of some sort. And you'd be working the whole day, depending if you're in the operating room or in the clinic and you're helping, doing the best you can and everything. And then I would read. I would read an awful lot. I would read every day, 3 to 5 to 7 hours a day. And I didn't sleep much. I would probably go to sleep 1, 2, 3 in the morning. But my brain was, was moving.
Did you ever see combat?
No, God, no. No, thank you. No, I never saw combat. I was on a ship once for an hour, not even an hour, once. They called me and said I had to go to the Brooklyn Naval Yard with another guy from St. Albans. They thought somebody had appendicitis. So I didn't know how to get on a ship. You just don't go on a ship. You have to find the flag and face the officer of the day and request permission. So I had to read that because we're in the ambulance going across. And then when I got there, there was nobody there. There was no flag. I mean, it was very disappointing. We had linoleum instead of bare metal. It wasn't like a movie. And the guy didn't have appendicitis either, so he just had a sore stomach. So that was my total almost combat on the ship.
Was there ever any injuries or casualties or anything that happened to anyone while you were working there, maybe your coworker?
No, luckily we didn't. Well, we didn't cause any. We did pretty well. No, I wasn't anywhere near combat. I took care of people who had been in combat. I took care of people who had suffered and still had the pains and difficulties. But I would hear about a lot of that stuff from, especially in Annapolis, because you talk to the people, and you'd spend a lot of time with them, and they tell you. But no, I never saw.
And no doctors ever got hurt, or no injuries to the staff or anything?
No, it was no. I mean, the worst thing that ever happened, oh goodness, was we used to do about 15 tonsillectomies, 13 to 15 every Monday morning. And Hanson, the guy I told you was a great doctor. And on Monday night, he and I would sleep there in case something happened. And he was teaching me something in the clinic, and they called him for some reason. We ran, and we ran down, and here was this poor child, who was about 5 or 6 years old, who was in distress, dying. So Jim starts, in those days they would do open massage. They didn't do closed breathing. So he started pumping air into the little kid, and he gave me his penknife. He says, put it here, open it up, and be careful. Look for something pink. And that was a lump. That was the first time I'd ever done something like that. And we unfortunately, the poor kid succumbed. Nobody knew why he died. He was the only one. But then again, I learned a lesson because it was horrible. And the poor parents were there. But Captain Taylor was called. And he came in and took care of it. Yeah. Started to cry. He took care of everything. And again, you learn with leadership, responsibility, you learn how to do the right thing.
What were the medals or citations?
Oh, I only got good conduct, and that's, you get that if you didn't go to jail or something like that. They didn't give, the things that I did were just pretty normal things for people doing the same job. We weren't in combat at all. We weren't threatened at all. I think you could get medals or ribbons in those days by being on a ship that went to a certain place. But I never was near anything like that. I mean, the closest I ever came was when I was at Annapolis, as I remember, there was a thing in Lebanon. And we heard that they were going to be taking corpsmen from our area and putting them in the Fleet Marine. I mean, that was the other thing I didn't know about. You could be a corpsman, and then you'd be put in the Fleet with the Marines, which they still do. They don't have their own corpsmen. So I volunteered to go, because the word was they were going to take these 2 guys that were married. And they took the guys who were married. I mean, I thought that was just horrible. But they weren't any better or worse than I was. It just somebody decided to take them, don't take him. Yeah, I thought that was horribly unfair at the time. Because maybe it's pertinent to say this. Life is precious, but when you're 18, 19, 20 years old, somehow it isn't that you feel something bad can't happen to you. You just treat it as though if it happens, it happens. It isn't special, but those of us that volunteered to go, we're really willing to just take whatever happened when you did go. You didn't wish for it, and it wasn't like you were a great hero. And I think maybe there's something psychological about the reaction young people can have at the time. But it's not that you want to be a hero or anything. It's just that it's easy to make a decision to put yourself in a position where you might be unsafe. but it's not special hero stuff of any kind.
Did you hear anything else about those two?
No,
gentlemen?
never. No, you never do anything. No.
Did you ever get hurt yourself on the job?
Hurt? No. There was no reason to ever get hurt. I mean, the closest I ever got to pain was I got a staphylococcus infection. It was a little infection in my leg. So I was in the hospital in Bethesda, and they had this stupid doctor. He decided that instead of he wanted a pump pierce it so the pus would come out. So he decided he would try something new, and he put a blood pressure cuff around my thigh, pumped it up, and then somebody called him, and he left me there. And the pain was fantastic. And that's the closest I ever got to killing somebody, and killing, it was awful. But that was not combat related.
Yeah. How did you stay in touch with your family?
Oh, call collect, and then I go home. That's probably she's listening. I would go home, and I was always it's a Greek family, so we're very close. And I would pop in. And I had girlfriends back there most of the time, so I would definitely go back and see girlfriends in Detroit from college days and from high school days. Like Peggy and I both have a habit of keeping friends. We still see friends from when we first married and before high school. I still see high school friends. We've not lost any friends in Detroit. And family. I mean, if they die, they die.
What was the food like?
In the Navy. Oh, wow. Well, what I remember the early part was there was too much of it. Like boot camp, it was amazing. You'd get up and they would have a tray, silver tray, and there were compartments. And they would just fill it up with beans and, but the thing is you're going to use a lot of calories during the day, which you didn't understand. But when there was good food, then there was a problem there because depending on where you were, the people who served it thought that they owned it. So if you had steak, they wouldn't give you two. There was no reason to hold it up. And the other thing I remember was the captain of the hospital in Annapolis, he ended up having a lot of trouble because he ended up stealing, essentially, furniture and stuff from the hospital and having a private practice in town. And they caught him finally. We knew about it, but nobody told him. But he saved money, he thought, by not giving us eggs every day. So we would only have eggs like twice a week for breakfast as a choice. Otherwise, they were pretty good. The Navy they'd give you a choice of eggs and waffles and pancakes and whatever, bacon. But this guy, he was saving money. Well, you don't save money when you're even to this day, you never save money in the service. They just give you less the next year. They don't say, here, you're a good guy, we'll give you more. They just say, oh, you don't need it. And Jones used to go crazy. Well, you asked the question, so I answered it.
Was it any better at the hospitals, or was it...
Oh, it was great, no matter what. The food was just always... The Navy food was always good. There was no... No matter where you were, you really couldn't complain about the food. The only issue was, would they give it to you if it was good? Could you have enough? But no, the food was always excellent. I think that was a hallmark of the Navy. They took great pride in taking care of people with the food.
Did you have enough? Did you was ever like a supply shortage to any of the hospitals at any time, or
a shortage?
Yeah, or maybe you're missing things and it was hard to get them in.
Oh no. No, we had everything. Well, I was in Bethesda was like the flagship. It was like the leader. It still is. Now there's a medical school there. Before there was a laboratory in the back where they were doing some really interesting experiments on a guy named Ashton Graybiel. They were doing experiments having to do with the vestibular system, spinning people around, and that was the precursor to the astronauts. We didn't know the topic they were trying to study, but now there's a full-blown medical school. And I used to go back, because after I got my doctorate and I was a professor, I would be reviewing grants for the National Institute of Health, which is right across the street in Bethesda. So then I would go back and visit the old friends. So we never lose friends. There's a semi-interesting story. Dr. Webb, the guy who was a head and neck surgeon, I believe is still alive. He's a wonderful man. And then in 1970, I'd say 4-ish, they asked me to go to the University of Chicago. It was the first meeting about recording brain potentials for research. And they had people from around the world coming in to give a talk. And I said, well, I don't do that. By then I was fairly well known for my own research, which was difficult. And different, not difficult. And they said, no, we just want you to be there and just be yourself, ask questions. Do what you want. So I went and it was a huge conference. And I didn't know it, but the physicians were coming in from around the country paying. It was they got credit for it. So first talk comes up, and the guy gives his talk, and I get up and I corrected him. I just went through the whole explanation of what he did and how it was fine, but he had no idea how the inner ear worked, and it's really this and this and this and this and that and that and that. And the guy said, thank you. That was I really thank you very much for, in front of everybody. He wasn't defensive. So they had a coffee break, and I went to get coffee with a professor from Pittsburgh that I knew, and all of a sudden I hear this southern voice say, Trahiotis, you still got a big mouth, don't you? And it was Blair Webb, the ENT surgeon, and he was proud as he could be, smile like that, because here was his boy showing off in front of the crowd.
This is the same when they kicked you out?
No, God, no, this was the Navy guy. Webb was a Navy, Bellucci was a civilian. No, he would never, Blair Webb was a fantastic guy. He was just a terrific, he was always teaching. He's taught head and neck anatomy. He was a wonderful. These guys that do head and neck surgery, people don't know about them, like the one that's here at UConn, Jeff. These guys go in there, gals too. They're doing surgery for 7, 8, 9, 10 hours straight with people that are really in trouble. And nowadays, they have trouble getting compensated because somebody's looking over their shoulder and saying, did you have to do that? Did you have to do that? Can't you do it 2 hours instead of 7 hours? Terrible. And he's one of these men that he would start at 8 o'clock in the morning and finish 5 o'clock at night if necessary, or stay. And he stayed that way his whole life. When he was in his 70s, and I call him and talk to him on the phone like every 6 months or something like that. His only complaint was that people would consider him too old to operate. And kind of insulting because he wasn't.
So did you ever feel any pressure, pressure or stress while working in the hospitals?
Oh God, yeah. Stress was, I had stress all the time. That's adrenaline's a wonderful thing. Part of it just stresses what keeps you going. Well, there's a thing called the Yerkes-Dodson principle in psychology. Yerkes is Yerkes hyphen Dodson, and it's in an inverted U. And so this axis is efficiency of performance, and this axis is motivation, stress, any dimension having to do with it. And what it says is there's an optimum level for whatever you're doing. And in order to really have peak performance, you have to have an optimal level of stress. And if you don't have it, and there are people who are not stressed, they don't study, they're not ready. If people have too much, they're debilitated. It's sort of common sense. But most things in life, they're common sense after someone points it out to you. So, yeah, we had a hell of a lot of stress all the time. But this is where you learn stuff. You learn what the really great surgeons were, the really great nurses, and you learn how to handle stresses. The way to handle this stuff, I think it's like any other form, is you have to be prepared. If you don't know what you're doing, well, now what? But if you're prepared and you can keep your cool, sort of, even though you're busy, and I guess the other thing is being able to handle the consequences of what you're doing if they don't go right. And I think that really is what handling stress is all about. I think that's not necessarily just in an operating room or someplace. I mean, that's life. If you know your stuff and you're prepared and you can think about what's going on, then the real trick is to be able to handle when things don't go right. And if you're not prepared for that, oh boy. But then there's a feedback that occurs that gives you more stress. But by and large, we were really taught by modeling and by example and by high standards, really high standards, how to handle stress of all forms.
Did you do anything particular was there any specific thing you did to handle the stress, like yourself? Did you?
No, I just loved it. I just went, you can tell, can't you? I mean, I get up in the morning, I'm ready to go. And, but you don't know, because the only thing you know is yourself, and you're not sure about that, pretty much. And to me, what we used to say when we were kids, that, I came from an immigrant family, I don't have anything, and if I fail, so what? I'm back where I started. So you didn't consider not accomplishing something the end of the line. It was just, okay, today it didn't work. We'll do something different tomorrow, or do it harder tomorrow, or do it better tomorrow, or, you just stubbornly move forward. Now it's fancy stuff. They say it's not success or failure, it's how you handle it. Well, yeah, sure, of course. But, I think if the question is, what's a supportive environment, right? I don't think a supportive environment is a protective environment. A supportive environment is one that allows you to be prepared and experience the plethora and the many dimensions of what your life is going to be about. Like for my students, all my PhD students, for all my life, and I've been a professor over 40 years, they all experience everything that I'm experiencing one way or the other. Because the only way they're going to know what it means to be a professor and try to get tenure, and, try to talk on the world stage and how to publish in the best journals, they have to see the people doing it. And they have to go through, you apply for a grant, you're not going to get that grant necessarily the first time. You're going to get criticism. And what do you do with the criticism? You know what you do? You put it in the drawer for a week. You don't even think about it for a week. And then when your madness, when you're really mad, the heat's down, then a week goes by, you open it up, and then you take the position, oh, I must be wrong. You always have to be wrong with criticism. It's your fault. Even if it isn't. The position is, it's my fault. What did I do? What did I do so they don't know how wonderful I really am? And that's the way you handle everything, I think.
Did you do anything special for good luck?
For good luck?
Yeah, if you were to go into an operating, maybe in high stress.
No, there's no good luck. You didn't think about stuff like that. I mean, there was no luck. I mean, it wasn't just an operating room. I mean, no, I mean, I played athletics our little hospital won the baseball championship for the Eastern Seaboard. And I was one of the heroes. I said, Peggy threw away my jacket because it got dirty. I mean, I had a jacket from the Navy, so 3rd Naval District champions and all that. So, I mean, then I care about luck when I'm going to bat and there's 2 outs. Yeah, well, that's different. See, then you're like a ball player, right? Then you put your cleats on, right? This foot first, but never part of your real life.
What else did you do for entertainment?
Entertainment. Oh, well, Sinatra. You saw when you came in. Music has been a part of my life from the day I was born, and my parents always had music, and I love music. When I was in boot camp, I was deprived of my music. When I was in corps school, I had my own. It was a Victrola type thing, they used to call it, turntable and whatever. And I had music. I always had Sinatra. I always had good music. and we played the music in the bathroom. So in core school, we would always, after night, we would be studying, and then we'd go into the bathroom, and Jonesy and Dave and a few other guys that would play Johnny Mathis, and I had my record with me. So music was always the biggie.
Were there any entertainers that you ever saw that came to maybe the hospitals?
Oh yeah, the Harmonic Cats. Now you probably don't know who they are. They were incredible. You have to look them up. These guys, they were various sizes, and so were the harmonicas. And that one little guy who come out, they had a harmonica this big, he played, and another one that big. So the Harmonic Cats came one time. But we were stateside, so there weren't really many coming, to be with us.
No USO shows or anything like that?
No. The USO was very instrumental in New York and getting me tickets so that I could take my dates to Broadway plays and stuff like I wanted to do in New York. That was fantastic. I'd call up and I would go in the middle of the week and be in the third, fourth, fifth row of a Broadway play. So I saw many, many Broadway plays. This was the time Peggy was not going out with me because of the bureaucratic stuff.
And this was after you got out of the service?
No. This is USO. This is when I was in New York, when I was in St. Albans, because I had time off during the week and I would get a date. And then I'd find women, whatever. And just, if nothing else, meet them. I would meet them downtown in a bar. I would meet them having known them. It wasn't pick up in a bar. You have to be careful how you speak nowadays, right? We didn't hook up in a bar, as they now say.
So it sounds like you did go on leave for a period of time.
Yeah, I'd go home most of the time on leave. Really. I mean, most of the time, yeah, I'd go home and see friends. And, in fact, nothing but, actually. Nothing but.
That's all you did on leave? Really?
Yeah. Well, I'd go home because there was always a girlfriend there, my friends. Then I'd see all my old friends from high school. And I had that 1 year in college. Are we going to have time to even talk about after the Navy, or do you don't care?
We can listen to it. Absolutely.
No, I mean, do you have questions about that? I know I go on and on and on. So.
All the time in the world.
Okay, all right. Okay.
Do you recall any particularly humorous or unusual things that happened? In the service?
Well, Dr. Odlin, who was, I think he's still alive. God, he's been in a nursing home, though. He's another EMT guy, surgeon. He was in St. Albans Naval Hospital. And on Fridays, they have captain's inspection. And the captain of the hospital would come, and there'd be the executive officer and the chief nurse. These important people would be coming down, and they'd go through the clinics and go through the whole hospital. It was a big inspection. So one day he comes by, and Otto was a very funny man. So they come in there, and they looked way up in the hallway in the clinic. There were pipes that were like 15 feet up. And then the captain says, Dr. Odlin, he looks up and he says, do you think there could be dust up there on top of those pipes? And Odlin says, no, sir. He says, we have a trained monkey that we send up every week, and he did really a good job 2 days ago. What's that? we all died. I mean, it was fabulous. And the captain had no comeback for that one. And it was a stupid question. Who's going to go up there and clean the dust off the top of the pipe? But Odlin was very funny that way. But he also did it. We had a patient one time, because they have this tinnitus where people have ringing in the ear. So he had to be careful. He had a very, very funny sense of humor. And we had this patient, and the patient was good. And he picked the right person. He knew the personality. And he says to the patient, what's the matter? He said he had a ringing in the ear. So he looks him right in the eye and says, does it go ding dong or dong ding? One could think about this as a demeaning, but it wasn't. This guy just died laughing. He picked the right guy. And it was a pretty funny moment. But he didn't have that many funny. Well, there was a funny moment. There was a time in St. Albans and New York where we're watching football and the airplanes are going overhead. in Long Island. So somebody said, Tino, you have a lot of pull. Why don't you call up and have them reroute their airplanes? So I did. I called up, and I got through, and I got all the way to the tower and told them that I was, what was my name? Farley Huntington of the Hempstead Huntingtons. Well, the Huntington family is a very famous family from Huntington, Long Island, but I was Farley Huntington. And the guy said, sorry, Mr. Huntington, we can't reroute the planes for you. So we thought that was the end of it, but it wasn't. The people who were listening decided to put Farley Huntington on the operating list as an emergency ear surgery at night. So they put him on as Farley Huntington, Seaman Recruit Retired. Now, there are no Seaman Recruit Retired. And then he had emergency ear surgery in the middle of the night. Well, the nurse that was on didn't even look at the forms that are going to Bureau of Medicine and Surgery. She signed it. The doctor signed it. It went out. And then calls started coming in. How is Farley Huntington? And they said, we don't have a Farley Huntington. I said, oh, yes, you do. So they said, look and see in the operating schedule. Well, he was there. So then flowers would come in, candy, and Peggy was in the middle of it at that time because they would call the ward. She was on the wards and as a nurse. And so that went on for a year. And then I was playing tennis. We used to play tennis at noon. So these two docs and I and another corpsman, we played tennis right next to the clinic. And there one time this guy he was an Air Force guy. And I knew something funny about him. I could just tell. So the ball was hit by the net, and I went to pick it up, and he comes over and he says, who's Farley Huntington? And he was an undercover, and trying to figure out who this non-existent guy was. And I just cracked up, just laughing. So that lasted the better part of a year. Even after I left, people were still asking about Farley Huntington. So I guess that's funny.
I don't know if that was really a prank, but any other sort of things you might have tried to pull on other people for some fun?
No, no. I mean, it really wasn't that kind of a situation, really. I mean, there was humor. I mean, most of that stuff depends upon the people who are interacting. I mean, again, it goes back to these docs were terrific. So when I was in New York, we would have lunch together. The corpsman, there were two other corpsmen, a nurse. She was a really old lady. I mean, she could hardly move, that one. But she was just ready to get out, you know. And the two docs, and we would have lunch together every day and laugh. And it was just wonderful. But it wasn't prank time. I mean,
what did you think of your officers or fellow servicemen?
Oh, they were fantastic. I mean, most of them were incredible. The ones that I didn't think well of, I will not discuss. And they weren't typically, most of them. Most of them were fine people, especially the officers. I mean, they were within reason. But when they were despicable, they could be despicable. I mean, really bad. So there was a guy named Wong, Lieutenant Wong at Annapolis. When I got orders to go to the ear, nose, and throat school, he hit him. He wanted me not to go. He was a vile person. And he actually hid the orders. And I knew that I was getting them because I was getting a phone call from Bethesda saying the school's going to start. Did you get your orders? So I went to him, and I said, I know I'm going to get them, and he told me, you don't have orders. So I said, well, okay, let's call this number at the Bureau of Medicine and Surgery. They told me to call this number. And he said, well, let me look. And he opened it up, and there they were. And he was a bad guy, but he was bad all the time. There was a chief there that was bad. But by and large, everybody was just super wonderful. I mean, they were just terrific people. They were the cream of the crop. I would say, just loving, but they were standard. I mean, it was, they knew their role, and they. Peggy, will you get that? Just take it away. They knew their role, and they discharged it. And they were good people. They were really, really good people.
Did you keep a journal?
No, I keep everything in my head. I mean, even now, I remember, I really have a good memory. And even when I read scientific stuff for my papers and things, when I read it, I know it. I really, well, we never got to my education, but the way I studied for my doctoral exams was later, way later on. I was working in ears. I mean, my research was in ears, which came from the training that was there, initially the motivation. But the way I studied for my big exams, which were hours and hours and hours, is just I took books and just memorized every graph in every book. That's all. It makes it easy.
Where were you when your service was over?
I was in New York, and then I went to Detroit to school. I went home. She was still Peggy was still in the service. I started school, and then I went to school from 1961 when I got out, and I got my PhD in 1968. And then we spent 2 years in Indiana. I was a postdoctoral fellow there, visiting professor. And then in 1970, we moved to Illinois, and I had my first laboratory of my own and my first academic tenure position. And then we were there 17 years, and then Connecticut wanted me, so they bought me and my lab, and I moved out here in '87, and I've been here, still working.
Do you remember that day after being discharged?
Oh gosh, yes. No one's ever asked me that question. That's an amazing that you ask. I can see it. There's no doubt about it. When I got discharged, by that time I had bought my first car, a new car. And the guy I told you about that was supposed to go in with me and didn't. He had a black Valiant. I got a white one. They had this little compact car, Plymouth Valiant, and I got this white car. God, it was gorgeous. And I remember driving out of that. Peggy and we dated 6 weeks, decided we were in love. And I left her and I said, okay. And I got in that car, and it was like tons came off my shoulder. It was like the sun was shining, and I'm driving this car, I'm going back, and it's like, this is before Muhammad Ali said it, but free at last, and Luther King, I'm free at last, and that's how I felt. But it wasn't from duress. It was like, okay, now you're into something new. It's the gates have opened. You don't know what's really there. And then as I drove, then I got, oh boy, now what? So I ended up being a scrub nurse at Henry Ford Hospital in Detroit during the day, worked 40 hours a week and went to school at night. And then I ended up in the research group at Henry Ford Hospital. And that's how I ended up doing what I do.
What was your homecoming like when you first got home?
Oh, they were just thrilled. I mean, because I'd been, 4 years. Well, a Greek family. Well, first of all, not only is it a Greek family, but of the whole extended family, I was the first son. First kid, first son. Well, that's like, if you're Middle Eastern, you're a Mediterranean, first son has a status, whether anybody likes it or not. That's just the way it is. And it's not the status that just the parents confer. I mean, everybody accepts it, unless you're just a jerk, But even then, you still have a jerk that has it, and you just don't take it away from you. But if you're a nice guy, then you're just looked up to. And nobody ever went to school, college, and I was the first one to ever go to college in my family. So, they're just happy to have you back. Then they met Peggy, and we had to deal with engagement at a distance, and then we got married. So then I didn't see the family that much because I was in school. When I was in school, I had the same hours I had in the Navy. In the morning till night, 6.5 days a week. Oh God! But the Navy served well because I had the energy to do it. Well, that was the other thing. Like maybe she'll see if she tells you the same thing. But Dr. Odlin, the guy that's still alive, when he was in St. Albans, when we were leaving the last week, I was leaving. we went out to his house for a barbecue. And I was throwing footballs with his kids. And he said to Peggy, if you can harness that energy, you're going to have a great life. That was his advice. I mean, we were only dating 6 weeks. If you can harness that energy. But that's what happened. I mean, the Navy gave you the chance to express it, and then I needed it later, believe me. You know.
So, do you remember what it was like, or what you did just in the days or weeks following first coming home?
Oh yeah, I mean, I had to go right to school, sign up for school, go to school. Actually, I got an early out. Instead of getting out in November, I got out in September in time for school. So they gave me a few weeks dispensation. But the deal was you had to go to college. You know, you're out. There was no GI Bill or anything like that. You paid your own way. And I went back to Detroit. It was $110 of $20 a semester I could afford. And then I went to Henry Ford Hospital, which was the place, and I applied for a job as a scrub nurse. So I was qualified because I'd done all this stuff in the past. So I ended up in the operating room there, and big cases. And the only place they didn't let me go was the ear room. And they never let me go to ear surgery because they knew I loved it. And they always would just put me in, you know, heart, chest, orthopedics. And then one day, the nurse that was supposed to work in the very specialized stuff in the ear surgery was sick, so they had to put me in. And I went in, and there was this really great surgeon named T. Manford McGee. And he was a little guy, and he was really a good surgeon, great surgeon. And he was the head ENT guy at Henry Ford. And he had an observation tube, so I'd be looking through the observation tube, and he was operating over here, and then I would give him what he needed, you know. And at one point, he was doing real difficult surgery. And I said to him, clearly, boy, you're really good. Those were my words. Boy, you're really good. And in a very haughty, surgical way, how would you know? So I said, oh, the reason I know is I was trained by this guy, I've been trained over here. The guy that invented that procedure, his cousin was one of my teachers, and I know this. And then the following week, I was his personal assistant, and I did all his surgery for research on the animals. And then he took care of me. And then he was really upset when I made the decision that I would not be a clinician, I would go into research. He never really understood that in the professional way. He took it personally. I mean, he didn't hurt me or anything, but he was more, you know, he was disappointed in a strong way instead of saying, hey, good. But he never, you know, it wasn't a bad thing. But the guy downstairs, who I have pictures of still, he was my mentor for years. And when I published my first papers, I published them with him. But that's how I got into ears, to do ears. And also the ability to take out temporal bones. I mean, I don't know if we should discuss this, but if you want to learn how to do surgery, a lot of the ways you have to get the ears embedded deep into the bone of the mastoid. Well, I was taught when I was a kid in the Navy how to go in the cadaver room when they were doing autopsies. And when they take the brain out, I would go in and they'd have permission for me to get the ear. And I knew how to cut it out and keep it intact, so then you could practice surgery on it. Well, not only did that get me a job, but last month I was at a meeting of the Association of Research in Otolaryngology, which I'm a member of. And there was a woman there, and she's from the Temporal Bone Bank. And they were looking for people that wanted to learn how to take out temporal bones. And I told her I already knew how to do it. They were willing to give me $350 for each temporal bone. So here, what goes around comes around. But there are temporal bone banks now because they still you have to practice on those little bones. You know?
So what was the name of the school that you went back to when you first got back?
Oh, Wayne State University. So Wayne State University is a city school in Detroit. At the time, there were 30,000 students. It's big, probably 35,000 or so. It's just a big city school. And it had very good departments in various departments. The hearing program there was really exceptional. It was tied to Henry Ford Hospital. So I got fantastic training. The guy that set up the research at Henry Ford Hospital ended up going to Massachusetts Eye Hospital from there, and he was the most famous guy. His name was Shookman. He was the most famous ear surgeon in terms of teaching. But he had set all this stuff up and would come back all the time. So the communities are small. I mean, there may be tens or hundreds involved, but that's very small. So everybody knew everybody. And once I began to get trained, then I was blessed. So here I am in a school that's not famous, but I'm in a place that's famous with people who are famous. And then you became part of the family. And then I went to Indiana, which was the biggest break ever. I decided, everything was programmed. My whole life was programmed from the day I got out of the Navy. I just knew the arc. I knew there would be 9 years. It wasn't like a day, but everything was, Peggy and I did it together, and everything was programmed. And then I applied, unknowingly, for the National Institute of Health and starting postdoctoral training fellowships. This is 1967 or so. It was kind of a new thing. So everybody always urged me, do it, go for it. Don't worry about it, go for it. So I didn't know any better. So while I'm writing my PhD, I'm writing this thing in parallel. In fact, writing another paper in parallel. And I applied for this thing. Well, I get it. So I picked Indiana University because it had the best hearing sensory program. Good people in vision, two of the best people in the world in vision, really great hearing. And I spent 2 years there, and then I learned the subspecialty of 2-year hearing, which has been my exclusive research since 1977 or so. So what happened before that is I got involved with the physiology and anatomy of the ear and the anatomy of the brain. Now you've got to roll back the clock. This is 50 years ago, and we didn't know about how the inner ear worked. We didn't have computers, and we didn't have the miniaturization of tools and things like this, and lasers to be able to look. So I got involved early on with the beginning anatomy of that people just discovered in the 60s. You think you know anatomy by then, right? But the ear anatomy, the ear is inside this horribly dense bone, and they're very delicate structures that have membranes and fluids. Well, it's like God put it in there and said, okay, I'm going to put it in there, you figure it out. You figure out how you're going to get in there, and then when you get in there, figure out what's going on. It's a challenge. And then how the thing works is a challenge. Well, so I got involved. And the first thing I did is I fell in love with this system that was just beginning to be thought about, called the olivocochlear bundle. Now, olivocochlear bundle is all of 500 fibers, 500 plus minus, that go from the lower part of the brain to the ear. And they had what we knew at the time was an inhibitory function, but nobody knew what it did. So I decided that was going to be my master's thesis. And I said, I'm going to figure out what that thing does. And everybody said, no. Because that entailed training the animals, and you had to pick what tasks are you going to do. If you want to know what it does, what do you teach an animal to do? Well, I figured it out from the anatomy and the physiology, and to put it together, I said, I'm going to test this, 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 and this. And they said, well, you're taking a chance. Well, what they meant was you get to teach the animals to do the task, and then you have to do surgery on them. Surgery means taking off the back of the skull, lifting up the whole cerebellum, and going in blindly into the middle of the brain with a little pick and scratching just on the surface to cut these fibers. If you go too deep, you kill the animal. You go to the right, you kill the animal. You go to the left, you kill the animal. And then you got to stop, put it all together again, and then test the animal after that. And then when he's all done with the testing, and you can't know which animal had fake surgery and which one had the real one, because it's science. Then you have to do this whole thing, which takes a year or two, everyday work. Then you got to take the brain and the ear and ship them off to another scientist so they don't know. And I did it. And I worked, and it's still, that study is still the first study. And it's very well regarded still, referenced still. And so I started doing that. Then I got into how does the brain work. So I started doing that with the cats on studying brain function. And then I decided that wasn't what I wanted to do. And then I got into effects of noise on the ear and the anatomy. And if you put loud sounds in and you alter the anatomy in a chinchilla or a monkey or a cat, then could you test and see what hearing losses were, what kind? And then could you tie those to the anatomy and the physiology? Well, I did that for 6 or 7 years and published those papers. And I kept that lab going while I was doing this binaural stuff on people. And I didn't see my family much. I got tenure right away. I mean, I was a wonder kid for tenure.
So this was at Indiana, or?
No, after Indiana was training. I was learning there. Okay. And then this is Indiana. I went to Illinois. I set up 2 labs. The alveolar bundle stuff was in Detroit. That was my master's and my PhD research. Indiana, I was learning to do other stuff in binaural hearing and the mathematics, and totally new mathematics, like wild engineering math and stuff like that. Then Illinois, I had 2 labs.
So, you have a job at this point?
Yeah, I was teaching 2 classes.
Yeah.
Oh, here we go again, 7 o'clock in the morning till 9 o'clock at night, 6.5 days a week. It drove her nuts, and it worked. But then what happened was, it's the stuff about positive reinforcement. You do what you're reinforced for. So I would be working my butt off doing this animal stuff, which I thought was important. Then I'm doing human stuff. And what happens is, people around the world know me more for the human stuff, which is much easier to do than the animal stuff. Right? And publish or perish is what professors are about, getting grants. Well, if I can publish 4 papers and good papers in the time it takes to do 1 or 2 papers here, I can spin this out over a career. And not only that, if the whole world cares more about those papers in terms of references, in terms of inviting you to go give a talk, write a book chapter, what are you going to do? Well, what I did is I said, well, I can do both, but I'm not going to do both in my own lab. So I shut the lab down, and then I made myself available to people all over the country who were doing that work. So then I became a consultant, an interested consultant, and I helped people do animal work in other schools. Then I got into infant hearing and how to study beginnings of hearing in infants and chickens. I got involved with studying hearing in chickens. And there's a man named Lincoln Gray who's now at James Madison University. And chickens come out and they walk around and they go peep, 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 peep. Well, a guy named Rubel, we're going in August, he's retiring and they're having a big dinner in Seattle, University of Washington. He and this guy, Lincoln Gray, they had these chickens, they go peep, peep, peep. So they noticed that when there were sounds, the little chickens would slow their peeps. So if you measure the inter-peep interval, the time between peeps, you can make a distribution of when there are no sounds, then you make a distribution when there are sounds, and then I knew all this highfalutin math where I could do statistical stuff. So I helped them.
This was obviously by hand, they didn't have computer programs. So
they had they had a computer listening to the peep, and the peep would, they had a little, when the peep happened, the computer knew it happened, and then it would make a distribution, and then after that it was by hand. So, but I showed them how to do the math, and I would go to Baylor every year and help with that research. So there's a whole bunch of places in the country. I still do this. I go to Europe a lot, and I help people there. They come to me. So I ended up doing animal animal-related work. And these what we did is we took the most elegant kinds of mathematics that were developed at the University of Michigan for testing people that came out of World War II. All this statistics called signal detection theory, and then used it on these little chickens, and it worked. So once they did that, and they showed it would work statistically beautifully, now the chickens' hearing develops in the first 9 days after they come out. So then now this ear is developing. So you could test it over time and watch the hearing get better. Then you can go do the physiology on one that was a day old, 2 days old. So, and I've been in the middle of that by not doing it. So I've been in the middle of really exciting stuff all over, just by being a friend and an intellectual help, being what to other people what they were to me in the Navy. Let's put it that way. So I kept up I still do all animal stuff, but at a distance. Okay.
And to clarify, your education was not GI Bill.
This was Peggy. No, what happened there? This is interesting to me because of the current culture. Peggy and I mean, she was a nurse. Her father, she'll tell you, her father was a physician in the Navy. I know. And when I was in school, principally we were married, in '62. So I was in school and postdoc till '70. She worked the weekends. And I had 3 weekends a month, and I took care of the kids, and I'd put them to sleep and study, so we did this the old-fashioned way together. So it's one of these stories about old-fashioned way, and we paid our own way. We didn't borrow money. We worked it out, and we kept a modest way of living. We rented. We didn't try to buy a house. We didn't invest in the stock market. We didn't play games. We just slowly but steadily paid for everything ourselves.
Good way to do it. Very good way to do it.
Yeah, but I mean, not easy. It's never been easy, right? I mean, it always took effort and it took time. But it took the two of us having the same goal. And if you think about it, her parents deserve a lot of credit because I came into their life 6 weeks dating and showed up with an engagement ring. First time I met them. And here we are. I mean, we've been married, this is the 53rd year, we've been married. So, it all worked out. It didn't have to, but we did it together. And, there's another little truism that it's easy to do what people around you are doing. So our friends, of course, most of them were students too. Now the guy next door, he had a lot more money than we did. So he would blow it, they'd go out to dinner once a week. Whatever, that was not for us. He's still a good friend. He's in Bradenton. We saw him a month ago.
So how about, you mentioned a lot of close relationships or friendships you made on the service. Do you have any more you'd like to elaborate on? And maybe also
Josie
ones that continue to now?
Yeah, Josie was in Dave Brower from the service, uniquely from the service, and the docs. They were, unfortunately, they die off, we're getting old. And Jonesy was a wonderful guy. I'd see him, and we'd talk. Now, he grew up in Grand Rapids, Michigan. And when he got out, he went to Michigan. He cared about the blue. And then he went to law school in Wayne State, where I went. And then he had a law practice, and then he became a federal judge. And then he retired. And then even when he had cancer all those years, he still had a part-time practice. And he moved around a lot. He kept following the sun. Not the daughter, not that kind of sun. Warmth. He and his wife would go to Arizona or go down to South Carolina. But we talk, and I would needle him if Michigan lost or whatever. Now, Dr. Odlin, I hope he's alive. I'm due to call him. But what you do is you just call, how do you say it? 6 months go by, 4 months go by, 8 months go by. That kind of stuff. So it's not I don't think they call it intrusion, but, checking in. They know you care.
So I think we already went over what you went on to do.
Sort of, yeah.
For the service.
Yeah, well, I'm still doing.
You're still doing it, Yukon Health Center, right?
Yeah.
How did your military experience influence your thinking about, I guess, just being in the military, or maybe even more in general, that changed that perception?
About what in general?
Just being in the service, how that may have influenced the way you look at the service now.
Oh, I look at it. In more, well, it's got to be complex because of what it's become. I mean, even though there were threats of combat and stuff like that, it was a draft time service. It wasn't that you knew if you were going to go in. Now you're the way it is now. I mean, the country was involved in it. I have relatives who've been in the service since and recently. They all had great experiences. They all got out and they all ended up, there weren't that many of them, but those that were there got out and they pursued in civilian life what they were doing. I mean, one of my cousin's kids writes the manuals for what do you call these things, the drones. So they've all had pleasant experiences. On the other hand, I'm totally distressed at having a mercenary type service and then having us do with that service cultural things that we may not be ready for. I mean, so I think it's just changed so much, and I'm very upset that we're in so many countries doing things that are virtually impossible and all the bad consequences of it. So I can't look at it with the same equanimity because it isn't the same. I mean, but this has nothing to do with the service per se. From what I know, the people are honorable, whether it's a draft or not. And I just cannot conceive of the corpsmen not being great, the nurses not being great, the doctors not being great, and the people that serve not being great. It's just that the mission now is so different, and the milieu is different, and the environment is so different, and that to me it's difficult when you're 76 years old, as I am, to see young people having to suffer, and apparently, from everything I read, not getting the proper care afterward, and proper respect, certainly. I mean, Vietnam, you didn't ask me about Vietnam. I mean, Vietnam was a very difficult time. And I was at the university teaching during the Vietnam stuff. Although I did some work at the Naval Undersea Center in 1973, I went to spend the summer there, helping them with dolphins.
Today is March 28th, 2015. I'm interviewing Constantine Trahiotis at his house in 6 Lime Place in Avon, Connecticut. The interviewer is Jason Augustine, working with the Central Connecticut State University Veterans History Project. You can continue. This is part 2.
Yeah, part 2. Part 2. All right, well, I'm going to ask the next question, I guess.
Have you joined any veterans organizations?
No, for no good reason. One of the reasons we're together is I happened to be in Stop and Shop, and there was this gentleman there, and he had Veteran of Foreign War jacket on, and I just started chit-chat with him, as I'm prone to do. And we talked, and I said, I'd be happy to help in any way I can. This is how we hooked up, including the Speakers Bureau, and I'm again, this is part of a reflex action, saying, hey, if you're older, give back to the younger, or give back to other. I assume, well, everybody's younger, so the Speakers Bureau, most of the probability is they'll be younger than I am, since most people are. So it's within that theme. Just give back. You don't think of it that way, but that's what you're doing, right? You're just being part of the culture.
Do you attend any reunions?
No, just we see each other so much, and I'm not much for reunions. I've only gone to I went to a reunion for the PhD 50th. In Indiana, they had a training thing, and it was 50-ish. So people from 45, 50, and 55 years training. We all went back to Indiana, and it was a wonderful, really famous group of people, as it turned out. There weren't no reunions for the Navy. I never even heard of that. I would have gone, probably would have gone. But usually we see each other, so the reunion is there's never been a loss of union, so you didn't have to reunite. I mean, you know.
So how did your service and experiences affect your life?
Totally. I mean, I ended up with a wife first, and I ended up with my ear research and my whole career. I ended up pursuing the interest of, well, how did I get into ear specifically? Well, I was in ear, nose, and throat school, but then why not noses? Why not eyes? Why not? So then when I went to New York for the last year, the two docs there were studying for their boards. So what happens is you get ENT training or surgery training or GYN training, and then there'll be a time when you have to go take your exams. So they have to take national exams to be certified as ear, nose, and throat or whatever they're going to be. So when we were there, among other things that went on, they were studying for the boards, and they'd have all these books. Well, their way of studying for the board, they were not the greatest scholars. I mean, they didn't want to be scholars. They were clinicians. They were taught at, both of them went through residency in Philadelphia at the Naval Hospital there. And this was something they had to do. You know, you had to go through this. Well, for me, it was great because it was something for my brain to be able to get involved in. So the way that we studied was, they're studying for their boards, and I would read the books, and then I would teach them what I read in the books while they're doing surgery. And then I'd ask them questions about what I had already learned in the books. So I was learning all this stuff ahead of them, truly hours ahead of them. I mean, they already knew the basics, but this is studying for the boards, right? And this is big stuff. And so that's what they would do. And they would take me to the operating room, and they would win bets because they would say, you know, this guy knows more about it than you do. And they'd say, well, come on, he's a corpsman. And they'd ask me a question, blah, 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 stuff. You know, the anatomy would come out. And so then I was learning about how the ear worked, and that fascinated me because that was part of that training. Well, it turned out the man that got the only man that ever got the Nobel Prize in this field, George von Bekeschi, he got it in '63, after I got it. Well, I ended up, when I was learning how to do the surgery that I told you about inside the brain, he grabbed me in the hallway and grilled me. I didn't even know who he was. And he told me, don't let anybody stop you from doing that work. You do that work. So here I am, I'm doing your work 50 years later. My whole life is dedicated to teaching about it, training people from here and around the world, especially Europe, which I still do. And like Peggy and I are going to Germany for 2 weeks, so I can work on research there. And one of the people there is from Holland, and I met him when he was a PhD student in 1992, and then he ended up being my trainee. Now Holland's interesting. After I moved here, I was here 87, brought the whole lab, brought everything. And the phone rang. And it was a person from MIT who was now in Holland working at the university in Eindhoven, funded by Philips, the big, you know, Philips TV, Philips Light, Philips everything. And they were involved in a context with digital formatting so that they could use the least number of bits to be able to get sound and FM, TV, and all that stuff. And they found with sound that there were 3 different groups. There was a contest, sort of. And one of the groups was from Germany, one of the groups was from Holland, and another group from Bell Labs and Associates. Well, they were all vying for contracts to do all this called bitrate reduction, to try to put the least amount of information out and still not know. Like MP3 is what ended up. So they called me up and asked me if I would come work on the problem, because they were worried about how detectable errors were, and everything was done with one ear. And then they realized, oh, we got two ears. So all the standards, they were doing all this stuff, and they were protecting against hearing the error that occurred in one ear. And then if somebody finally realized, well, what if you get errors in both ears near the same time? Well, I happen to be one of the 3 to 5 people in the world that knew about that. So they asked me to come out, and that started a whole new thing. So I went out for 3 months, 3 times, and we really we published papers, and we worked it out. But the funny thing was, if they would have asked me the answer to the questions they wanted to know, I could have told them. Because there was a guy named McFadden who just retired from the University of Texas this last year. He had published a paper in 1971 where if you knew that paper, you could sort of figure out the answer. They never did, luckily. So I went out there and spent 3 months, 3 times. Tremendous young people. And it ended up, 2 of them ended up being my postdocs. 2 of them are now big shots in the field. One of them is now hair professor in Germany, big shot. The other guy's a professor in Holland. Together we wrote 9 papers that are not bad and influenced. But now they don't have to do it anymore as much. It's kind of funny because memory, so as you know, memory is so cheap because you're recording this for 2 days or whatever. Now they don't care anymore because they have so much memory. They just do 16 bits. They don't have to worry. We got it down to 3 bits, 2 and 3 bits. Pretty good. So I worked on that three times, similar problems. And the guy there, he's an interesting guy. He was a Jesuit priest who was getting his PhD in electrical engineering at MIT, got a girlfriend, left the priesthood, stopped with that girlfriend, married another one who he's still married to. He went to Holland, and now they're in Georgia. We were with him a month ago. And he's a really good, great scientist. He's had some health problems, but his name is Houtsma, a wonderful guy. So those trainees have come here. He still reads the journals. He still reads papers. So it's a wonderful life. I mean, the people are,
Intertwined, kind of.
intertwined. And I might as well tell you that last May there was the Acoustical Society of America. They were kind enough to have a special deal for my career. And these people came from different countries and talked about working in the lab and all that stuff. It was pretty neat. I can, for your own benefit, if you'd like, or whatever the word is, I can give you a copy of what went on there.
I like that.
And I can give you that. That just happened. But what it really is, it showed you that I live long enough. I mean, or that I won't be living that much longer, or both, right? But it's been that. So my whole life has been determined by my family and my career by that one decision. That's probably true for a lot of people in different ways, but you look back on it and you say, "Holy cow!"
Well, all of it.
Yeah, holy cow. Well, actually, now I think about the time I told my parents I was going to do this. My mother went nuts. My mother truly went crazy. And my Greek father, who was much older than she was, he said to her in Greek, well, something like, don't you trust his judgment? Has he ever been wrong about anything? In Greek. And she said, no, I trust his judgment. And he said, so do I. Leave it alone. No, forget it. Let him do what he wants. And that was it. She just shut up. Truly. But she was going nuts. You're your first kid, you're going to leave college. Now, I'll tell you the donut story. Now, that's a good one. My dad was a real baker. Okay? And he was, well, it's service related, sort of. My dad came from Greece. He was only here a few years. He came when he was 9 years old, alone. Then he went into World War I. He enlisted in the U.S. Army. He went to France, got shot there. He got the Purple Heart. He was shot in a place called Chateau Thierry, which Peggy and I visited one time without knowing we were there. We just drove. I said, "Oh my God, this is the place." And he ended up hunting, fishing, gambling, as Greeks did. And then when he was older, he got married, and he had this donut shop. He died the week before Jack Kennedy in 1963, and donuts died with him, and these were great donuts. So I didn't have any of those donuts. 1987, we come here, and we live in Canton at the time. And the mover said, "Tino, can we get donuts?" Which meant, "Give me money, I want to go buy donuts." So I gave him money. Guy goes and comes back, and I put a donut in my mouth, I start to cry, because it's my father's donut. So I cried out. So I said, Where'd you get these donuts? And he told me, and I drove in Route 167, it's going over there. It's now Luke's Donut Shop, but it was Luke's Praise the Lord Donuts back then. So I go in there, and there's a gal, and I said, "Is the baker here?" And, "Yep." So I said, "Ask him to come out." So this old guy comes out. God, he didn't look like my dad, but the caricature was like my dad. I mean, he had all the flour, and he's all this flour is coming like my dad, just flour everywhere. And he comes out, and I said, "Okay, you are the guy that trained you. We're in Massillon, Ohio, in the late 30s. Cleveland, Ohio, in the late 30s, early 40s, or Detroit in the 40s. Which one?" He said, "Oh, Massillon. How did you know?" I said, "Oh, my dad's recipes. And I have the books." And the person that owned it sold it recently, and his son is our dentist. Colin Sanford is a wonderful dentist. I was telling him the story. He said, "Oh, my dad owns that place." Now, he's since sold it to an Indian, from India, man, who knows the story. So now I get visitors, like 2 years ago, year and a half ago, there were 6 young people, and one older guy from England came to visit, people I teach. So I took them all to the donut shop, and they ate my dad's donuts. It was kind of cool. We just walked in, and the Indian guy, the owner, says, "Oh, these are his father's donuts." It's pretty cool.
They're still there today, right?
Yeah, you can get them there. Yeah, they're there. They're his donuts. Now I noticed the last time I was there, one of them, he's starting to change a bit, but the guy, it puts me in a funny position because it's his shop. Right. But it's basically his recipes. Yep. Then that wild, who would guess?
So is there anything else you want to add to the interview we maybe didn't cover?
Well, I'm blessed with, both of us are blessed with a nice family, great friends that we've kept. We've had a really nice life. Being a professor is a good thing. See, well, maybe I should talk about that a little bit, because back in the 40s and the 50s, and it's in Detroit, being a blue-collar town, always, right? Everybody in my family was working, if either a business or they were working for the cars. Now that was important, because when you worked on the cars, it didn't matter, Ford, Chevy, Chrysler, they were in trouble, because they were all unionized, laborers, and they'd go on strike every year or two. You know what that meant? My father had to pay for their food, because they weren't making anything anyway. They could get by. And then they would go on strike for a nickel an hour, and they'd be out of work 6 months, 8 months. It was horrible. So this is why you were told, get an education, get an education. And I went to Mumford High School, which is Detroit, which is a great school. Gilda Radner went there. This is the one that Eddie Murphy had in Beverly Hills Cop. That was Mumford High. That was my high school. I have the real T-shirt because I played on the football team there. But we told, get an education. And this school had PhDs, and 2 of them on the faculty. And it was really a great, real school. High standards, taught you a lot. The important thing back then was get an education. They can't take it away from you, is what they said. And then my mother wanted me to be a dentist. Oh God, I teach at the dental school as part. We're medical school, dental school. I spent a lot of my lunches are with dentists that I can't imagine. With my penchant for getting bored, I mean, how often can you look at a mouth? I mean, goodness gracious. I mean, I couldn't do that. And we laugh at it. But the idea was, once you get an education, they can't take that away from you. Okay? And if you're a businessman, same thing. You be the boss. And why? Because their life experiences. It wasn't philosophy. They knew what happened when you weren't the boss. They knew what happened. And just to cement that, I spent a summer working at Ford. I was working at the Wixom plant at Ford, trying to get money to save for school in '56. Well, that was another thing. I left high school early. That's a funny verb. Left. I was asked to leave by the principal and my teachers. No. I mean, one day they just said, Tino, we're going to teach you, the math teacher, chemistry teacher, the lit teacher, English teacher. They took me to the principal. And Colonel Clark was his name. He was waiting. And I went in there and they said, Tino, we think you're ready. You should leave. And they meant leave. They meant graduate. So I graduated. I only went to school 3 years. And that was '56. So they told me, and I said, I better talk to my parents, So I went home and I said, had a meeting with the principal. Well, when you have a meeting with the principal in those days, whack, I mean, teachers were gods. And they thought I did something wrong. And I said, no, they told me I should leave, that I was ready for college. So they said, okay. So I think within a month I was graduated. And then I started Wayne State. I graduated in June. The next week, I was taking physics and English in the summer school at Wayne and working. And that's when I was working in various jobs. So, I mean, here again, teachers again are supportive. If you consider throwing you out, telling you to leave, but they were supportive. And I kept seeing teachers. I mean, my whole life, teachers were always special. And I think they should be special, if they deserve to be special. They have to, like everybody else. But like Ms. Russo was the principal in Schultz Elementary School. Miss Wolfenden was a first grade teacher. I mean, we lived in Canton. I was reading the Hartford Courant one night, and I always read the obituaries to see what's going on and make sure I'm not in there, ruin my day. And a man named Wolfenden, the obit was there. He was a curator of the museum at Yale. So I said to Peggy, I bet you that's Helen Wolfenden. Look. And I look at, there it is, survived by his sister, Helen Wolfenden. I said, that's my teacher from first grade. I'm going to call her. Now, we've been together just an hour, and you know damn well, I'm going to call her means I'm going to call her. So I found her, it was 10:30 at night or so. Peggy says, no, you can't call her. And I said, yes, I can. So I called her. I said, hi, this is Tino. Tino Trahiotis? Tino Trahiotis? Is your mother Helen still alive? Blah, blah, blah. She couldn't believe I'm calling, but that's what teachers were. And then there was a high school, great teachers. Miss McCall, we used to go and have tea with her after we graduated, not during, after. We would go to her house, and this guy, he's from high school, he's up in Marquette, Michigan. Actually, I should tell you, his daughters, I lost track of him. His name is Leonard Dinkin. I think he's the only Jewish guy in Marquette, Michigan, if you're allowed to say that, because they don't go up there, they go to Florida. I mean, they're smart, they don't go. This guy's freezing his butt off up in Marquette, Michigan. I mean, it's near the North Pole. So we lost track of each other. We were really close in high school. Took our LTC together. So one day, the phone rings, and I'm a professor in Champaign, Illinois. And it's Dinkin. I hadn't seen him in 12, 15 years. And so he's pickle nose, I'm twinkle toes. And he says, hey, twinkle toes, I found you. I said, how'd you find me? Now, you're not gonna believe this one. He's in Michigan State now with his daughters they're becoming speech and hearing speech audiologist, all right, audiologist and speech pathologist. So they're in school at Michigan State, and it's toward the end of the year, and they're taking their final exams. And they're at the dinner table, and he's watching TV, and he's got year apart girls, and they're both in the program, and he hears my name. And he can't believe it. I mean, Trahiotis is not there are not many of those. And he's got up, he says, "What are you talking about? Where'd you get that name?" And they had some of my papers. And they were studying my papers for their exam. And then he looked at the papers, said Champaign, Illinois. So he calls me up, and we've been together ever since.
How about that?
Isn't that great? See, this is the kind of stuff like that. So we talk to each other. I'm worried the last call, I didn't get a call back. And he's been ill. But I figure if he's really ill, Diana will call me. And, yeah, he's a cool guy. But they're up in Marquette, Michigan. But it's, again, the same. The theme's the same, right? The theme is pretty much a common theme of having a good time with nice people and returning the favor. Pizza's been big.
Yeah.
Big. Pizza's big. We make pizza all over. I made pizza in the Tower of London. Maybe that's interesting.
Yeah.
I gave a talk, Nottingham, where the Robin Hood comes from. I was giving a talk in Nottingham a few years ago. And I have pictures. I can prove all this stuff. I brought the pictures, but I was giving a talk in Nottingham, and we had to take a train after that to a town in England. I forget the name of the town, Essex River. But the placemats are in the kitchen. And on the train, I talk to people. I talk to dogs. Anything. And there's this young guy there named Stephen Bailey, who I have a picture of. And I'm asking him, you'd think I'd be talking about myself, but usually in these situations I don't. I get people to talk about themselves. And turns out he's the chef in the Tower of London. So Peggy knows something's going to happen. And I say to him, well, where were you trained? France. French trained chef in the Tower of London. So then I ask him what turned out to be a good question. What can't you do? Okay. In fact, I asked it, I used the vernacular when I asked the question. What are you screw up all the time? Mm-hmm. And he said, pizza. I can't make pizza. I can make pizza. So he said, would you come? I said, well, tomorrow Peggy and I are going to be in London. So I'll come, sure. So he told me, gave me his phone number. And we went, and where we were staying was this very distinguished, is the word. He's an MD physiologist that's the most famous ear physiology researcher in England at the time. We were staying at his house. And they said, don't worry, he'll never get in. They don't let people in the Tower of London. So I was supposed to be with Peggy during the day. And they said, don't worry, Peggy. Well, I went to sleep at night. All I could think about was I'm getting in the Tower of London. Why? So I could wear the hat, which I have a picture of me wearing the Beefeater hat, the big guy. Mm-hmm. That's what I wanted. I didn't care about the pizza. I wanted to wear that hat. So we go in there, and there's a line. And then I knew the time. I told them the time I'd be there. So I jumped the line. They had a little chain. And I jumped over. The guy comes over with the Bobby guy. And I said, I'm here to make pizza. So Peggy can't believe it. They took me in a guard shack, and I said, call Stephen Bailey, I'm here to make pizza. Here's his number. They know Stephen Bailey, so he comes. Yep, he's here to make pizza. Mm-hmm. So Peggy says, I can't be part of this, and she left, and she may tell the rest of the story. I don't want to get into that, because we didn't hook up. I got in trouble. Yeah. But I ended up going up there, and I ended up making pizza for the guards at the Tower of London. It was amazing. I went in there, and again, I was told, watch your mouth. Be careful how you speak, because they had the help there were from all over the world. And they all different countries, they're laboring, but they're all given proper respect, and they all have a job. And now I'm going into their kitchen. It's what do you call it? Territory, right? They have their own little fiefdom territory. So Stephen said, he's the head chef, but he says, you gotta be careful with these guys. So now, how am I gonna cook? I'm looking around, and I just have to I get 10 pounds of flour. I mean, I'm just winging it the whole way, right? And I'm making this massive dough. And at one point, Stephen says, Tino, he says, do you realize where you're standing right now? What do I know? Right? I mean, it's a metal table, it's 30 feet long. He says, you are standing directly above the Queen's family jewels. And I said, you mean Tino's jewels are above the Queen's jewels? And that broke the ice. These guys from all these different countries, black, white, whatever they were, they just died laughing. Ho, ho, ho. And I said, time for wine. So they brought the wine out. You know, it was noon, noonish. So that started it, so I could be myself. And so I made the pizza, and I have pictures, and I ended up wearing the Beefeater hat. Well, the other thing they did is, these guys had rifles. I mean, the Bobbies don't have rifles, but these guys have live ammunition. So I said, well, how many people are you going to be cooking for here? You know, what are we talking about? And he gave me 24, and I said, well, where are they? And he says, well, somewhere in there. And I look in there, there's a room full of guys, and they're all in their camouflage with boots. And I said, I don't see anybody. And he went, you could be British with that sense of humor, because they're wearing camouflage. So they come out, and the pizza pan came out. And the first guy comes up and takes a rifle with live ammunition, puts it right next to the pan, just takes it, slings it off his shoulder, and grabs a piece of pizza. Now imagine, if I shouldn't say this, but if I were a terrorist, just imagine. But pizza has this power. Pizza does have power. Yeah, so Peggy and I make pizza everywhere. I mean, in this country. And
is that where it started? Over in...
No, we started doing it in Champaign. We started, Peggy's, I'm not very interesting, so I never had a hobby. I just listened to music and work. And sports, I played football, baseball. But she said, get a hobby. So I started to cook, and then once I got into it, I started reading the books. And once I read the books, I really read the books. And then I began, and I would start correcting her. And then there's a thing in there that says Peggy's Kitchen. I had to get it for her because she was mad because I'd say, well, I'm acting like it's Tino's kitchen. So then we would make homemade pasta. I got into an Italian period, which I'm still in, even though I'm Greek. And most of the stuff we did was Italian, homemade pasta. So you just do that, and you drink a lot of wine, and it's a nice thing with your friends and your family. And pizza's really the great leavener. It's a joke, it's a pun, but it's leavening bread. It's the great leavener, and everybody around the world. So they come here, they want pizza. I promised you pizza. If I ever shut up, we're going to have some. And we do that. I mean, one of the biggies was we were in Copenhagen a couple of years ago, and at 6:30 at night, decided we're going to make pizza. Decided. So we ended up going and getting all the stuff, and we made pizza. I think you got about ready to quit, huh? So we made pizza, finished about 10, and the gal whose apartment it was, she remembers it. Now she's got 2 kids, and we're going to see her in Germany. She's now a professor. She was a student. In Spain, I teach in Spain. We've been going. We're not going this year, a friend's going. We've been there 4 or 5 times in Salamanca at the medical school. So I go teach about the ear for 2-3 lectures. We stay a week, and then we close it by Peggy and I make pizza for the students. And it's sort of I guess things become a quasi-tradition when they're repeated enough.
Related to pizza.
Related to pizza. And England? And so when we go to England, wherever we are, we're very, very lucky because we get invited to France and England and Germany, and they're all hearing labs, and most of those people come here. So there's been a steady parade of people from Europe. And that's an accident, because when I was in Champaign, which is 130 miles south of Chicago, you couldn't get people to come there. I mean, it's out of the way. And certainly you could get them to come for a talk because it was a famous university. University of Illinois is a big deal. But if I wanted them to come and work with me for 6 weeks or 6 months or 2 years, not easy because there's nothing there. Here, you have Boston and New York, and if people are going to either one, they're happy to come here. Or come here and stay with us and use our house as a hotel and then go to New York or Boston on their own. So we have a steady stream of young people coming from Holland and France and Germany and Spain, and it's pretty good.
Now, I'd like to clarify before the end, but when you started college before you went into the service,
1 year.
and then you continued and transferred those credits after
Yeah.
the service? Okay.
Yeah, well, it was 4 years, but yeah, there was no issue because it was all basic stuff, right? It's English and physics and biology and, and then I just continue the stuff after. So then I went to get the bachelor's, and then the master's and the PhD were the next set. They're the same. You take classes, but then you do the research separate for both. Yeah, they were.
I'd like to thank you for your service, and absolutely for sharing your story with us today.
Well, my pleasure, believe me.